He didn't even look at her when he spoke and just stood there in his expensive suit, flanked by two lawyers, and said coldly, "Miss, you're no longer welcome here. Stay away from my grandfather." And just like that, the woman who had spent months caring for the old man was accused, humiliated, and cast out of the very home she had filled with kindness. But what the grandson didn't know was that his grandfather had already written a letter, one that would soon turn the whole situation upside down and change their lives forever. Before we begin, make sure to like this video and subscribe to Kindness Stories, where every story reminds you that genuine kindness never goes unnoticed, even when the world misunderstands it. Now let's begin. Every morning at exactly 7:30, Sophie Lane passed the small ivy-covered house on Oak Ridge Street. The first time she saw him, the old man by the window, he was struggling to water the potted plants that lined his porch. The can trembled in his wrinkled hands, and before she could stop herself, Sophie ran over and offered to help. He tried to refuse at first, proud and polite, but she smiled and said, "Please, it looks like your plants are thirsty. Let me give them a drink." That was the beginning of everything. Sophie was a simple woman, working part-time at the local grocery store, living alone in a small apartment nearby. Her days were busy, her heart quiet, until that morning when she met Mr. Henry Whitmore, a retired literature teacher whose health had begun to fail. From that day on, Sophie stopped by every morning. She watered the plants, brewed him tea, and sat with him for a few minutes before heading to work. They talked about books, about love, about loss. He told her stories of his late wife, Margaret, how she used to make apple pie on Sundays and hum old songs when it rained. Sophie became like family. She cleaned his porch, fixed his radio, even brought him groceries when his legs hurt too much to walk. It wasn't charity. It was connection. Two souls, one lonely and one kind, filling each other's emptiness in small, beautiful ways. Over time, neighbors started to notice the change. The old house looked alive again. Flowers bloomed, the curtains were open, and laughter could sometimes be heard drifting through the window. But Sophie never wanted recognition. She never asked for anything. She just liked knowing he wasn't alone. Then one morning, when she arrived with freshly baked bread, everything was different. The door was locked, curtains drawn. A black car stood in the driveway. She knocked softly. After a long pause, a young man opened the door, tall, sharp, and clearly impatient. "Yes?" he asked. "I'm here to see Mr. Whitmore," Sophie said. "I help him with—" Before she could finish, the man interrupted. "He's with his doctors right now." "And who exactly are you?" She smiled awkwardly. "I'm Sophie. I live down the street. I just help him a little, that's all." The man frowned. "Help him?" His tone was icy. "We've been reviewing his finances and personal affairs. There have been irregularities. We'll take it from here." "Wait, irregularities? What are you saying?" Sophie stammered. The man didn't answer. Two men in suits walked in behind him carrying briefcases. One of them glanced at Sophie and muttered, "Best if she leaves." Then came the words that would burn in her mind for days. "Miss, you're no longer welcome here. Stay away from my grandfather." The door shut in her face. Sophie stood there in silence, the bread still warm in her hands. She couldn't understand. Mr. Whitmore had always spoken fondly of his grandson, Ethan, though he rarely visited. Why would he think Sophie was doing something wrong? That night, Sophie sat on her couch, tears streaming down her cheeks. She wasn't angry, just heartbroken. She had lost someone who had become like a grandfather to her. She could only hope he was okay. But what Sophie didn't know was that the story wasn't over. Mr. Whitmore had left behind something, a letter that would soon reach her hands, and with it, the truth that would turn everything around. 2 weeks later, Sophie was wiping the counter at the grocery store when a man walked in. He was the same one from the house, Ethan Whitmore. His expression was no longer cold, but tired, almost ashamed. "Sophie Lane?" he asked softly. She nodded, wary. He took a deep breath. "I need to talk to you. May I sit?" They sat at the small table near the window. He reached into his coat and pulled out an envelope, old, slightly wrinkled. "My grandfather asked me to give this to you," he said. Her hands trembled as she opened it. Inside was a handwritten letter in Mr. Whitmore's shaky script. My dear Sophie, if you are reading this, it means I'm gone. Please don't cry. You gave me more joy in my final months than I'd known in years. You reminded me that kindness still exists, not in grand gestures, but in simple presence. My grandson Ethan doesn't understand yet, but one day he will. I've left instructions for him to take care of you as you once cared for me. Never doubt that what you did mattered. You were the light in an old man's fading days. Tears blurred Sophie's eyes. She pressed the letter to her chest. He's gone? She whispered. Ethan nodded, guilt flashing across his face. He passed peacefully 3 days ago. He hesitated. I thought you were taking advantage of him. When I found money withdrawn from his account for supplies and saw your name, I jumped to conclusions. But then I found the receipts. Groceries, cleaning products, medicine. You never took a dime for yourself. You spent your own money helping him. Sophie's voice shook. I didn't want anything from him. I just wanted him to feel cared for. I know, Ethan said, his tone breaking. And I owe you an apology. He slid another envelope across the table. A legal document. My grandfather left you the cottage. He said it was his wish that it stay filled with the same kindness you brought to it. Sophie gasped. No, I can't. He wanted it this way, Ethan said. He said you made it a home again. He wanted it to be yours. Sophie wept silently. For months she had given without expecting anything. And now the one person who had truly seen her heart had left behind proof that goodness never disappears. It simply echoes forward. Over time, Ethan and Sophie became close. They restored the cottage together, planting the garden she once tended. Every spring they filled it with tulips, Mr. Whitmore's favorite flower. And though he was gone, his spirit lived in every laugh, every shared cup of tea, every small act of kindness that blossomed from what Sophie had started. Because, in the end, it wasn't about inheritance or reputation. It was about love, the kind that asks for nothing but leaves behind everything. If this story touched your heart, don't forget to like this video and subscribe to Kindness Stories. Every story here reminds us that no act of kindness is ever wasted, because sometimes the smallest gestures create the biggest miracles.